Hi, and welcome back to the Shane Plays Out of the Abyss Notes series, where I give my notes and tips and thoughts on running Out of the Abyss, which is the 5th edition Underdark adventure. Actually, my group and I have finished, but I've got about 2 episodes worth of content, 2 videos worth of content, whatever, to put out. So, and I know I've gotten several comments like, "Is it still coming?" Yes, it's still coming. And then after this finishes, uh, probably the next campaign to be on the lookout for, we're probably going to be Tomb of Annihilation, but we'll see. Anyway, for those of you that are new to this series, it's first of all, thanks for watching, but it's not an actual play. What it is a summary of what happened in the most recent session or sessions with my group as I DM'd them through Out of the Abyss. Also, just thoughts, notes, tips, whatever on dungeon mastering and DMing and rules clarifications and all of that. So, and if you're a returning viewer, thank you so much. So let's get right into it. Got some viewer feedback here. So let me put on my +3 spectacles of viewer feedback, and we'll take a look at what there is to see for viewer feedback. So first of all, Questing DM said, recalculating monster DC for abilities attack. See the DM's guide, page 278. Also, the difficulty check, the DC for Stone Golem slow attack is DC 17. So, yeah, I've gone back and I've tried to remember, like, what was my confusion, because I think the previous video, I was like, I had some confusion. What is the DC for the slow attack or whatever? There was some sort of confusion I had, on what is the difficulty check for something, and I think it was the slow attack on the golem, which is right there, bigger than life, in the monster stat block. So I'm not sure what I was confused on, but Questing DM is right. If you go to page 278 in the Dungeon Master's Guide, there's a section in there. I think I even bookmarked it yesterday. Yes, I did. And there's a whole section in here starting, on page 273 on creating monsters, creating a monster. And one of the things that's covered is on 278, page 278, it talks about the save DCs for a monster's attack or some other trait that you get it. So it's all laid out right there how to do it. So if for some reason you're like, I don't know what the DC should be for this monster, there it is, Dungeon Master's Guide. So there you go. And if you're DMing, you should have a Dungeon Master's Guide. It only helps, right? So, okay. So thank you very much, Questing DM. Isaac Jones said, maybe base the DC off your players. And then he's also referring to the discussion I had, like, if you don't know what the DC should be, what should it be? Or if you don't know what it is or whatever. Think of your character that is most likely to save, the one with the highest wisdom in this case. If he has a +7 to his wisdom saving throw, make it a 17 DC. Then adjust it higher or lower depending on how hard you want it to be. +1 or 2 if it's real difficult, or -2 or 3 if you think it's a weaker type of golem, because we were talking about a stone golem's slow attack. So that's not a bad mechanic in general. Okay, if you're trying to think of a way, that's actually the way that game designers think, right? Like, okay, how do I make sure that this is challenging but not too challenging, or easy but not too easy, or whatever, for an encounter, for a player or a party or whatever. So on the face of it, that's not a bad way to do it. You scale the difficulty depending on the players. But the thing is, that's more of a video game kind of mechanic, in my opinion. Not to say, I mean, if you're out there and you're like, Eureka, that's golden, or Isaac, if you're going to use that in your game, use it. I'm not telling you not to use it. I'm just saying, for me personally, because a lot of this stuff is subjective. You know, what works for me as a DM may not work for you, and vice versa. So, but this is more of a video, like a massively multiplayer online role-playing game, MMORPG type of scaling mechanic to ensure that no matter who it is, they're having a good time. Whereas in D&D, I mean, there's a set difficulty, right? Like this, I already know my party should be this level. Like the, if you're DMing ahead, you should know ahead of time, like my party is this, and the difficulties of the encounters need to be of a certain level. And then, you already know ahead of time, I guess. So if you're doing a one shot spur of the moment, then, and you haven't really had time to know that in advance, maybe that would work. But there should be a set challenge level to a tabletop role playing game. That being said, if somebody wants to use that mechanic, go for it. And I see that being a really useful mechanic for one shots, an ad hoc. We're just throwing everybody together. Let's just jump into this dungeon and see what happens. And you got to kind of scale on the fly. But if it's an ongoing campaign, I probably wouldn't use something like that. Okay, but I do, again, I want to give credit to that is a good way of thinking about game design in general. Okay, Anders Rollig said, yeah, I love to see the series still going. Cool, Anders, thanks. I've not got to host my group in half a year or so, or a year or so. We still want to finish this campaign. We have the 3 last chapters to go. Love to see your series having finally caught up with my campaign. I will definitely rewatch your notes on the Fetid Wedding and until the end of the campaign before I finish mine. Funny thing is my group randomly encountered Juoblex and killed her. Wow. During the chapter 10 encounters, but they did not finish off Yunogu. They teleported away, or maybe Yunogu teleported away. I'm not sure. So I guess Yunogu will face off against the Lady of Fungi and the characters will be caught in the middle of that. I love the Star Wars D6. Talking about in a recent video, it might have been the last one or whatever recently, I was talking about how I was able to run the Star Wars D6, the West End Games D6 from the 80s and 90s system at Arkansas RPG Con. So anyway, and that was a lot of fun. He says, might be one more comment before I'm done listening to this video, and guess I will not meet you at a con unless you visit Norway. You never know, Anders. I might just make it that way. So, and then Anders also said the rules for cone spells are really good laid out in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, as you pointed out. Yeah, again, I think we talked about this last video. There's Xanathar's Guide to Everything is a very good resource. I've got all my notes right here on a video for it. If I can just get caught up, it'll be the most belated review in the history of D&D reviews, maybe. But yeah, it talks about spell area of effects and stuff like that in a very easy to understand, detailed way in Xanathar's, and also gives you some optional ways of doing it. Okay, so Peter, and I've met Peter personally, so I'm not trying to mess this name up as a joke or anything like that. Well, even if I hadn't met him personally, I wouldn't. I'm just saying I'm going to do my best here. It's Peter. I don't know if it's Oler or Whaler or Oeller. Anyway, I'm going to guess Oler. If I'm getting it wrong, Peter, please correct me, either in a comment or next time you see me at the game store. He said, had a blast playing the original Star Wars D6 RPG at your table. I also thought it very exciting, the TIE Fighter battle where we captured the Imperials and were able to hand them over to the Rebellion. Yeah, they popped a couple of Imperials out of the TIE Fighters like popping spam out of a can. Kind of stealing that line from Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. There's a scene in there where he explains somebody getting popped out of an apartment that way. And this was one of those moments where, I mean, it totally was not in the scenario. I'm sure the people that wrote the scenario back in the 80s just assumed that, they would either blast the TIE fighters out of the sky or escape the TIE fighters. Instead, they disabled the TIE fighters and went over and captured a couple of Imperial TIE fighter pilots. It was also very entertaining to meet the Proto-Akbar before he made Admiral. Wish we could have had another 30 minutes or so to blast some stormtroopers at the RPG con. That's one of the disadvantages of a con, although they have many, many advantages, is they're like, okay, you're from this time to this time, and then somebody else needs that table next. So yeah, we had to kind of rush the ending, but we had fun. Enjoy the show. Turned a fan a few weeks before the RPG con in Arkansas. And he's replying here where I was saying, honestly, I'm not trying to be, I don't consider myself a celebrity by any means. But he said, you're a celeb in my eyes. So, okay, Peter, if you want to view me as a celeb, that's cool. I'll take it. I will let you know when I'm ready to have you guest star in the Star Wars 2nd Edition campaign I'm pulling together. Yes, sir. Peter's talking about running some Star Wars in the local area, classic Star Wars. Okay, and I said, level out, I'm not a celebrity, but I guess I accidentally cast charm on you. Enjoyed meeting you at the con. You were a great part of the Star Wars game. Thanks for checking out my radio show podcast as well. All right, cool. Thanks, Peter. And let's see. Yep, here's another comment. Vasily, although he's going by Vase now. Vase. I really liked how you played Jarlaxle. I missed a very big pop opportunity, apparently, especially now knowing more about who he is and his major role in the Waterdeep Dragon Heist. I really wish I had made him more memorable. Sounds like you put some thought into role-playing him. Very excited to hear about the big finale. So my response on that was talking about Jarlaxle, who is like Dritz Do'Urden's cousin, I think. He's like a sort of a rogue mercenary drow, however you want to pronounce it. Probably the second most famous drow in Forgotten Realms fiction behind Dritz. So I only read a little of the fiction he's in. This is my response. So I winged it for the most part, but the way my players reacted, either I got it right or they liked it even though I was off base. I think if you just go flamboyant, but also in control with a hint of menace, that's the key. That's what it is. I just played Jarlaxle very well, hey, but at the same time, he's he's not leaving any doubt that he's dangerous and he is in charge. So that's it for viewer feedback this time around. And we'll talk about some rules, clarifications and tips and things like that. And then we will dive into the recap of a recent, actually it's probably going to be, I've got about 3, maybe 4 sessions to cover in the next 2 videos. So this video will probably cover 2 sessions while we had left our intrepid heroes in the Tower of Sorcere searching for Gromph Banray's grimoire. All right, so here's some rules and tips and that sort of thing that came up during the sessions that I'm covering tonight. First of all, rules-wise, already kind of talked about the save DC for the Stone Golem slow attack, so I won't go over that again, even though I had it marked here as a rules thing. Another thing that came up, and I can't remember that's one of the sort of bad things about not being able to record for a while after a session. I can't remember the context this came up in. However, there was some discussion, is grappled the same as restrained, or does restrained the same as grappling, or if you're grappled, does that also mean you're restrained? That kind of thing. So I just wanted to cover those again. I think I've talked about them before in the past, but they are 2 separate and distinct conditions. Remember, D&D 5e has distinct conditions. So let's see. Let's look at grappled. Okay, so grappled. By the way, I've said before, I'll say again, I think that's one of the areas there where it's one of the areas there. It's one of the areas where I think D&D 5e went too rules light. They've struck a pretty good balance between being crunchy but not being overly crunchy, and playing fast but yet still having lots of rules and tactics. And I think grappling's where they probably shed a little bit too much. A grappled creature's speed becomes 0, and it can't benefit from any bonus to its speed. The condition ends if the grappler is incapacitated, which is another condition. Incapacitated is. And then the condition also ends that if an effect removes the grappled creature from the reach of the grappler, or grappling effect, such as when a creature is hurled away by the Thunder Wave spell. Why they wouldn't both be hurled away by the Thunder Wave spell, I don't know. Maybe one made their save and the other one didn't, or something. I don't know. I'd have to go look at the Thunder Wave spell. All right, so here is restrained. Restrained creature speed becomes 0, and it can't benefit from any bonus to its speed. Same as grappling. Okay, however, When you're restrained, then an attack rolls against the creature have advantage, and the creature's attack rolls have disadvantage, and the creature has disadvantage on dexterity saving throws. So that's restrained. The only thing that restrained and grapple have in common, or grappled have in common, is if their speed becomes 0 if you're under one of these two conditions, and it can't the target that's been restrained or grappled can't benefit from any bonus to speed. But if you're restrained, you're not necessarily grappled, and if you're grappled, you're not necessarily restrained. So, unless one or more effects specifically state, oh, you're restrained, and then something else grapples you or whatever, unless that's stated somewhere in the effect of the spell or the attack or whatever it is that's happened, you're only restrained or grappled, not both. Even though, you're like, oh, well, they should be the same. This is where, and I don't mean this sarcastic or snarky. I mean, honestly, D&D is a game engine. It's a game engine. It's not intended to be a reality simulator. So it's not going to cover every situation in a way that makes total common sense. So there you go. Just wanted to cover that. And then also the rod of rulership versus dominate person. So we had a situation come up where they were fighting. I can't remember the type of demon. Hold on a second. Let me see if I've got it written down here. And is a yokel? Yokel, I'll have to look it up. But they were fighting a type of demon in Gromph's Inner Sanctum. And it had dominated one of the player characters. And then one of the other player characters used a rod of rulership to try to, I guess, undominate or pull the domination over to them instead of the demon dominating. And what I did, I was like, how would that work together? You're already dominated. So what if somebody else tries to charm you or dominate you or whatever while you're dominated? What happens? And what I ruled on the spot, and remember, if you're in the middle of a game, unless it's a natural time for a break or whatever, or if your group is just extremely patient and doesn't mind extended pauses in the gameplay, it's okay to look something up. Well, I'll go and look that up real quick, but try not to, okay, hold on, everyone. And then you got your nose in a book for 10 minutes trying to figure out how the rules interact. So what I'll do is I'll make a ruling on the spot, or, after just quickly looking at some rules, and then say, that's how we'll do it this time. I'll try to be consistent moving on. But if there's a reason that I'm going to change that in the future, or that was the wrong way to do it, then I'll try to explain it. So again, one of my main things as a DM is, just try to be consistent. If you rule one way in one instance, try to rule that way again moving forward out of respect for the players, unless new information comes to light or you decide to change, and then explain it. Don't just, say, oh, okay, I know I've done this way in the past, but I'm going to do it this way this time, or this way moving forward. And, here's why. And I think the players will feel more respected when you do that. And it's just fair, in my opinion, to do it that way. So, okay. But anyway, so what I ruled on the spot was, the player character, who was currently dominated, had to make a saving throw to resist, or they would fall under the control of the rod of rulership instead of the dominate effect. And I even made a note here, wasn't sure if that was the right way to go, but didn't want to slow game in the middle of combat. So what and by when I say, well, they have to make a saving throw to resist, I think the rod of ruler. Let's see how the rod of rulership works, and then to figure out why I came to that resolution. So let's go to, here we go. And another thing I want to point out while I'm talking about that, charm is not mind control, because both dominate person and the rod of rulership have a charm effect. And like dominate person has other effects, but it also, one of the things it does is it charms the target. So, charm is not mind control. Charm, they're not going to do every little thing you tell them to do. They just see you extremely favorably and are more receptive to, suggestion and that sort of thing. But they, you can't say, go jump off a cliff. And they're like, oh, yes, master. And go jump off. I mean, charm is not that. All right. Robe of whatever. Rod of rulership. Here we go. Each target must succeed on a DC 15 wisdom saving throw or be charmed by you for 8 hours. While charmed in this way, the creature regards you as its trusted leader. So I ruled on the spot that the player character must make a saving throw to resist or fall under the control of rod of rulership instead of dominate effect. So, they would already be making a saving throw to resist the rod of rulership. So why? Obviously, there was possibly an additional saving throw. Maybe there were 2 saving throws. Maybe they got another. Maybe they had to save twice or something. I can't remember what I did. But anyway, that was by having afterwards had time to reflect and research. Actually, it's pretty much the general opinion out there that you can one target, one character, NPC, whatever, can be the target of 2 different charm effects. So there's old Bob, and I charm Bob, and then my enemy charms Bob. Bob's charmed by both. And the effects, like being open to suggestion on things or whatever the charm effect is, just happens to apply from 2 different people on old poor Bob. One doesn't necessarily cancel. I don't charm Bob away, or the other person doesn't charm Bob away from me. We both have a charm effect on Bob. So Bob sees 2 different other characters extremely favorable. So, and that's when you need the DM to, well, what if player A says this and NPC B says this, and how does that all interact with poor Bob? And that's where the DM kind of has to, sort through it and go, well, the charm effect is applying from both. And, how would Bob sort through all that if it's contradictory or something like that? So, anyway, the main takeaway from that is that you can have, like, I could dominate person on Bob, and then somebody else can come along and use Rod of Rulership and charm Bob. And both effects are on Bob until removed. So I looked up dominate person here. So dominate person, has some other effects on top of charm. You do get a charm effect, and then there's some other effects, like you get a telepathic link with the charmed target. You can specify specific or simple and general courses of action, or you can use your action to take total and precise control of the target, and then they're completely dominated. And until the end of your next turn, the creature takes only actions you choose and doesn't do anything you don't allow it to do. So that would override a charm. But that's, that is, you're taking your action to completely telepathically override the target. So, and that would override the effects of a charm for that one turn, while that was happening. So, Anyway, the point is, two charm effects or two, control effects or whatever can be simultaneously on a target. I don't read anything, and the general consensus out there as I searched around was, that one doesn't nullify the other one or cancel the other one out. So hopefully that's incredibly, stupendously, fascinatingly interesting to you. So, all right, I think that's it on the rules. I wrote some tips down here that I want to share with you before we get into the sort of the summary of what happened in the recent sessions. Google, if you don't know, you can tell Google or ask Google to roll dice for you. So I don't know let's see if I can, and I don't know if it works by just typing it in, but like if I go, okay, Google, roll a D11.
Okay. You got a 1.
So if you need like an odd dice, or if you don't have a dice handy and you need, like I got to randomly, fairly roll a dice, so that it's obvious that, I didn't fudge the number or whatever. You can use Google. And in that case, like if you had 11 possible targets and you needed to determine which one of those randomly got hit or was going to be attacked, well, obviously you don't have a D11, right? And you can just have, I assume Siri on Apple would do, on an iPhone would do the same thing, but you can even go, okay, Google, roll a D20.
Coming right up. You got a 7.
There you go. So, okay, Google, roll a D5.
Sure. You rolled a 3.
Right? Now, I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if I can do like, okay, Google, roll 2D8.
You got it. It's 8 and 7 for a total of 15.
There you go. Right? I didn't even know I could do that. Okay, Google, roll percentile dice.
Here's more from the web.
It actually took me to a search result. Okay, Google, roll a D100.
All right. It's a 60.
There you go. So handy little random number generator for standard dice and then, non-standard dice. Now, one of my players actually has, odd shape like D5s and D7s and D3s and that sort of thing. And sometimes they'll hand one over to me, but, I found that to be really helpful. And, just, I need a really quick dice roll, especially if it's an odd, numbered dice. Like I got 7 players here and who's going to be the target of this next attack, right? I'm a big fan of random attacks, especially if it's a big battle or they're fighting a big, huge boss, unless one player is just really making itself an obvious threat. A lot of times I'll roll, randomly to see who gets, the next attack or whatever. So anyway, all right. So that's a tip. Also, in the Tower of Sorcere, or kind of in this whole Menzoberranzan area, all that in general. Now, you don't want to take away the player's agency in doing things. You want to let them run their own game and enjoy their own game. However, I found that Grin, Vizeron's apprentice who accompanies the party to Menzoberranzan, is, if they run into like really difficult, very puzzling, very, if they're unsure what they're supposed to do, or if there's a trap or a puzzle or something like that, that they just can't figure out in the outer and inner sanctum or in the Tower of Sorcere or whatever, after they struggle for a while, if they're just not getting it, you can use Grin to sort of nudge things along or maybe drop a hint. So I found that's been very, very helpful. Like I said, you don't want Grin to do everything for them. But there's like a magical portal and a sort of a magical labyrinth that they have to figure out. And if they're just not getting it, or if they just need a careful little nudge, I found that Grin is a very, very effective, plot device or whatever for doing that. So, and it's fun as we go along. We've been building Grin more and more to his own character, and he plays, not the vital role in the climax, but he plays an important part. So yeah, I think that's it on the tips and stuff that I wrote down. So what we'll do now is we will get into what happened last time. Let me take off my +2 spectacles of viewer feedback and or rules clarification and or tips, and we'll move right along. All right, so when we finished our last session, they had just entered the Tower of Sorcere with the help of Jarlaxle and his Bragan Diarth mercenaries. So, as I mentioned last video, I want to remind you again, for some reason, the book doesn't have maps or sketches or layouts or anything like that for the Tower of Sorcere. Now, Elven Tower, which I've mentioned a lot in this video series, it's like elventower.com, their Out of the Abyss guide. He basically came up with his own maps and all of that for the Tower of Sorcere. Now, you can go either way. I ran it just fine based on description and just kind of coming up with things on the spur of the moment. But if you want specific maps and all that, I definitely recommend Elven Tower as a good resource for that. They're really their whole Out of the Abyss guide is a wonderful guide for Out of the Abyss for running this adventure. So let's see. Let's go back to Sorcere. So some things you want to know about Sorcere is once they go in, the whole tower is protected by permanent guards and ward spells. The tower's drow residents are immune to the effects, but intruders are not. So if they have the support of the Council of Spiders, which in this case the players did, then they have a password, which when spoken aloud inside the tower grants the speaker immunity to the spell's effect for 1 hour. After that, the password magically changes. So any character still in the tower must deal with the guards and wards effect. Now, it'll probably be next video before I get to this point. The players were in the tower longer than 1 hour, and the guards and wards spell effect went in to effect. It didn't on these couple of sessions, but I encourage you to go look at the guards and wards because there's a lot of different things. It's not just a magical mouth shouting alarm, alarm. I mean, there's like webbing and fog and limited visibility and all kinds of stuff going on, confusion with the guards and wards effects. So I'll cover that in the next video most likely. So, but do look that up. There are random encounters in the Tower of Sorcerer. Really what the Tower of Sorcerer is, game mechanic wise, is it's a series of stealth checks and random encounter tables to sort of, tell the story of creeping through the tower to make it to Gromph's outer sanctum. Now I'm trying to remember how, let's see here. Yeah, the characters this is on Sorcerer starts on page 205 in the Out of the Abyss book. The characters might encounter drow, wizards, as well as their apprentices, familiars, and other magical creatures. Remember, there's wizards that literally, drow wizards and apprentices and slaves that literally live here. They don't just work here, they live here. So if they entered with Quinthel Bonray's permission, she's the big baddie, bad, highest matron mother of Menzoberranzan currently, they could avoid most trouble with tower's inhabitants. Otherwise, stealth and caution will be important. My players did not have her blessing. And in fact, I had tailored my game where they were told, stay away from her. because that was a whole nother subplot inside Menzoberranzan that I did not want to run, because we've been playing this for a long time, a couple of years by the time we wrapped, and there wasn't really a lot compelling story-wise there for as far as the actual plot. Now, if they had just really gone for her and wanted to have role-playing with her or whatever, I would, of course, have accommodated that. So what it is, the characters make 4 DC 13 dexterity stealth checks. The parentheses stealth group checks from the moment they enter the tower to when they reaches the Archmage's Sanctum. Each failed group check results in an encounter from the Sorcere encounters table. The characters make the same checks while exiting the tower. So basically, instead of saying, well, you turn right, you turn left, you go up these stairs, and there's 8 doors here and all that. Instead of all that, you just, okay, you're creeping around. I need 4 group stealth checks. In a group check, if you'll remember, is half of the party has to pass the check. So if you got a party of 5 or a party of 4, just make it easy. If everyone rolls DC 13 dexterity, stealth, whatever their stealth value is, then if you have a party of 4, as long as 2 or more pass, the whole group passes. If 3 out of the 4 fail, everybody fails, even the person that made their check. So that's basically how a group check works. And there's also some rules about armor and stuff like that. We had a thing come up. I can't remember if I talked about this previously or not, where, we had a player specifically state, I left my armor on. And then when it came to these stealth checks, they were like, oh no, my armor wasn't on. And I was like, no. And even, other people were like, no, you said very clearly that, you had your armor on. So, it's like almost an automatic fail. There's rules for armor and stealth checks and all that. So that was an interesting thing, where I had to, as DM go, no, you said that you specifically said that you didn't have, or that you had your armor on. And then they were like, well, I want to take it off. And, then we started looking at, briefly, how long does it take to doff and don armor and all that. And they decided, well, we don't really have time to just stand here in the middle of the corridor and change armor out. So some of the encounters they can have if they fail a stealth thing. Now, they can fail all 4 stealth checks and still make it to the outer sanctum. It's just, if you fail a stealth check, then you roll. There's on page 206, there's an encounters table where you can run into a giant spider. You can run into a mad drow mage. You can run into a shadow demon. You can run into slaves. You can run into a succubus or a succubus or an incubus, drow mages, all this stuff. And one of the things I'll point out here is, you can definitely double check these encounters for yourself. But one I definitely want to point out is the drow mages. There's a 50% chance that these mages have been forewarned of the party's arrival, either by Vizeran Devere or by Maître Mother Quinto Banry, in which case they let the players pass. In this case, it'd be Vizeran for my party, my players. Otherwise, the drow mages assume the characters are intruders and attack, unless Grin Alstel is with them. If the characters declare that they have Quinto Banry's permission to be here, they can convince the mages to stand down with a successful DC 12 Charisma Persuasion check. So the way I did it, they ran into a couple of groups of drow mages. I think both times I rolled, and that 50% chance did not let them be forewarned by Vizeran, or they weren't part of the Council of Spiders or whatever, that inner group of mages. So, they were about to attack, and then, Grin, in one case, Grin stepped forward and was like, hold. And I think I let him talk everything out, and they were able to keep going. another case, Grin, for whatever reason, failed his charisma or whatever it was, and in a fight did happen. But that was when they were on their way out. So also the Succubus or Incubus is interesting. Because a sometime lover and ally of one of the tower's wizards, this fiend adopts the form of a slave, your choice of race. Curious to see the inside of Gronph's Sanctum, the quote-unquote slave offers to guide the characters there, taking them along a route that avoids other random encounters. So you avoid, boom, from that point forward, you don't have to worry about random encounters. But this fiend does try to steal Gronph's grimoire as the opportunity presents itself, first by using its charm ability to convince a character to part with the book, and then by using etherealness to disappear with it. So since the whole point is you're there for Gronph's grimoire, that's probably not a good thing, right? So, okay. So Gronph's Outer Sanctum, after they do 4 group stealth dexterity checks, whether they're successful or not, unless things just go really south, then they'll end up at the outer door of Gronph's Outer Sanctum. Now, what's going to happen here is you've got his Outer Sanctum, which kind of looks like a study, and then you've got a magical portal through a secret door that leads to kind of a crazy planar situation. Planar, extra planar, pocket dimension kind of thing. And then you get to the Inner Sanctum. So there's a lot going on here, role-playing wise, puzzle solving wise, secret door, all that stuff. So it gets pretty interesting. So they come to Gronph's Outer Sanctum. The black marble door to Gromph Monterey's chambers is etched with silvery runes around its edge and closed with an arcane lock keyed to him. Picking the lock requires a successful DC 23 dexterity check using thieves' tools. Forcing the lock to open requires a successful DC 25 strength check. And a knock spell also opens the door. Grin Ostel can have the spell prepared if none of the adventurers know it. So this was another... In this way, there was a couple of times where I had, and I can't remember if I did it in this particular instance, but there was a couple of times that I had Grin, cast minor spells if the player or if the group was out of a spell or something like that, or if it was like, okay, obviously we need to get in here for the story to continue or whatever, then when all options are exhausted, Grin would be like, oh, very well. And, like cast knock or whatever. So, so even though like, as the story unfolded, the players got a little bit more of a relationship with Grin, but not, they never became super friendly, but they did get a little bit more of a relationship with him. So, they come into this chamber, you read the description, the main thing to know is that there's a lot of bookshelves. There's a desk. There's a 7-foot tall obsidian statue of a 4-armed sword-wielding drow warrior. There's burning red candles with continual flames and all this stuff. So that, read the description. And, it's a cool room for the Archmages of Menzoberranzan, who is currently running and hiding because of the horrible things that he's done on accident or as the unwitting tool of Lolth. So if anyone other than Gromph enters the chamber without speaking the word tournay, which means quench, a fire elemental appears and attacks the intruders. Casting Dispel Magic on the door before it opens disables this trap, but the elemental can't be dispelled once it appears. If anyone tampers with the desk or the shelves' contents or attempts to remove anything from the room, the 4-armed statue animates and attacks. It has the statistics of a stone golem, but replace its multi-attack and slam actions with the following. So it gets force instead of a multi-attack and a slam action like a normal stone golem, it gets 4 sword attacks. anyone speaking the statue's name, which is Zajun, aloud isn't attacked by it. So there you go. So what I did actually to make things more interesting was I had 2 fire elementals attack, because at this point in the game, the party, even though my group never, I think they got like 10th level at most, and this is supposed to be a 1st through 15th level adventure, but they've always been a large group. So, that's kind of balanced out the fact that they didn't hit 15th level. 1 fire elemental is nothing, especially with clerics like Banish. And in fact, I think if the 2 fire elementals attacked, one of them got banished by the cleric. So I threw 2 fire elementals at them just to make it a little bit more fun. And then one thing I messed up on, which I didn't realize till I was preparing for the following session, because they basically, the way things worked out is they made it into the sanctum, the outer sanctum, the study, if you will, fought the fire elementals, and it was like, okay, we'll see you next week. Well, one of the players specifically stated while the fight was going on that they were looking at the desk and the bookshelves and all that. I should have had the golem attack, and I didn't. So I didn't realize that until next time. But it worked out better timing-wise, because then at the very beginning of... because we needed to wrap the session that night. And then at the very beginning of the next session, they had a nice little golem fight. So there you go. Let's see here. Let's see if there's any other notes here I want to on that. So they get into that fight. There are there is some treasure in this room in the bookshelves. Definitely make sure to check that out. There's a 15,000 gold pieces worth of books and scrolls and whatnot in there. It requires a DC 15 intelligence arcana check of 10 minutes. After 10 minutes to, kind of figure out that Gromph's grimoire isn't in those books. And then during that, it's not here. They will discover that the collection's 5 most valuable books are worth 1,000 gold pieces each. One of them is trapped with a glyph of warding that triggers the 3rd effect of Bestow Curse. All right. The drawers of the desk are sealed with arcane lock. Picking the drawer's lock requires thieves' tools and a successful DC 23. A knock spell or successful dispel magic cast on the drawer removes its magical lock. When open, the drawers are empty. An effect to Liamon's secret chest shifts the drawer's contents into an extra dimensional space when anyone other than Gromph opens them. So, a little bit of detail, not really any treasure there. There is a trapped secret door in this room. Let me look at my notes here and see if there's anything else that I want to talk about in this room. Let's see what. Okay. So a lot of this is a lot of my notes are on the players kind of searching the bookshelves. One of the players who doesn't have good arcane or whatever was randomly just stuffing books into a bag of holding. So I rolled a D15 on Google, because it's 15,000 gold pieces worth of books and scrolls and whatnot. And I had them, and by rolling that, they got, I rolled a 3. So they got 3,000 gold pieces worth of whatever, just stuffing randomly, into a bag of holding. And now one of the players, did, was with a better, intelligence check, did identify, oh, that book's worth 1,000 and took that. So there was the reason Quio, or not Quio, the character of Quio, who's the monk, they rolled a 7 on their intelligence. So they were like, I have no idea what any of this is. So that's when they just sort of randomly grabbed stuff, and I rolled a D15, and they rolled a 3 and got 3,000 gold piece worth just sort of randomly. And there is a there's a trap here with an imprisonment spell I'll talk about here in a second. One of my players did get caught in that. Let's see if there's anything else. One of the warlock, who's always kind of crazy, and very. This is the same character that caused the big consternation by touching the drow representative at Mantle Dareth with the gem that had the demon lord trapped inside of it and all that. While all this was going on, there's this stuffed lizard skin chair or whatever. And let's see. Yeah, on the bottom of the chair, there's two different chairs. On the bottom of one chair, she's a moon elf. She carved moon elves rule, drow drool. And then on the bottom of the lizard chair, she wrote Loth sucks, all hell deep Shashalis. Right? Because she's got the trident, Wave, who's all about, sea gods and deep Shashalis and all that. She converted to deep Shashalis when getting the trident way back in like White Plume Mountain. So I did do a roll to see if Grin noticed this going on, because he would, even though he's like their ally, what are you doing? This is like, wow. But Wave was super pleased because she carved all hell deep Shashalis in the very epicenter, for the most part, of Loth worship. Right? In one of the Tower of Sorcere in Menzoberranzan. And he was extremely pleased. And so Wave unlocked the weapon of warning ability that it has for the player. Because if you remember with these very powerful legendary weapons, I've been letting the weapons scale up and unlock as the party goes on, as the group goes on and the players level up. So Wave was so pleased that it unlocked weapon of warning. So thought that, Wave thought that was pretty great. So let's take a look at this trapped secret door. Now, any party member with a passive wisdom perception score of 20 or higher notices a secret door in the wall, while a character searching the room for secret doors must succeed on a DC 15 wisdom perception check. Any creature with 12 hit dice or fewer that approaches within 5 feet of the secret door without speaking the word callous, which is trust, triggers an imprisonment spell with a save of DC 17. On a failed save, the creature is trapped in minimus containment inside a gemstone in Gromph's Inner Sanctum, so in a different room. The trap ceases to exist once a creature becomes imprisoned. A successful dispel magic cast on the secret door removes the trap. All right, so let's talk about that for a second. So this imprisonment spell triggers automatically when somebody walks within 5 feet of the secret door, and if they're 12 hit dice or lower. So all of these players are like level, 10, 9, 10 or whatever. So they're affected. So I had kind of sketched out the room, and people were saying, well, I'm searching here and I'm searching. So I was like, show me where you're searching. And they're kind of showing me, and this was the first character to get within that 5, and they failed their DC. So off they went, boom. And they get shrunk to like 1 inch high, and they're in this gem inside of Gromph's Inner Sanctum. But all the other players see is the ones that happen to be looking, was that the player that got imprisoned is also like, whoa, and starts kind of shrinking and blinks out of existence at the same time. Like, whoa. And, the arcane spellcaster type characters and Grin are all kind of like, what happened here? And they're doing, the best to kind of figure out what the heck happened. And then I also had to take the player aside that got imprisoned and say, well, this is what you're experiencing now. And I explained to them, I had to go to the part of the book that describes Gromph's Inner Sanctum and kind of describe what they saw, which was basically, like like a wizard's laboratory more than a study. But also where there's like a female drow just standing there for the most part. Now, one thing that's a little frustrating to me is that, they tell you get trapped in this diamond, but when you read the Inner Sanctum description, it doesn't tell you where the diamond is, if I can remember correctly. Let me take a look at that real quick. Which, that's kind of, come on, But anyway, so I figured it out. Yeah, the Inner Sanctum, when you look in here, it doesn't... Yeah, okay, well, no, my bad. There's a small stand atop a workbench. It contains any creature trapped by the imprisonment spell that guards the secret door in Gromph's Inner Sanctum. My bad. So it does. It doesn't tell you exactly where. Because again, none of these rooms, even the outer and inner sanctum, none of them are provided with diagrams or maps in here. You just have to theater of the mind it. Or go like Elven Tower and use what they gave you. So, the way this secret door works, it says opening the secret door requires a knock spell or a successful DC 20 intelligence arcana check to assess and manipulate its magic. Beyond it lies a dark void that can't be dispelled or destroyed. Anyone or anything that touches the void is instantly transported to a labyrinthine demiplane similar to that created by a maze spell. A creature that succeeds on the DC 20 intelligence check to escape the maze reappears in the middle of the outer sanctum. However, if a creature casts a spell of 5th level or higher while in the demiplane, all creatures and objects in the demiplane instantly appear in Gromph's Inner Sanctum instead. So if you escape the demiplane, you end up back in the outer sanctum. If you cast a spell of 5th level or higher while in this demiplane, then all creatures and objects in the demiplane instantly appear in Gromph's Inner Sanctum. So honestly, this one can be kind of hard for players to figure out because there's not a lot of clues. There really isn't a lot of clues, on how to do this. So one thing that I did, or the one thing that I had to do, if you go look up the maze spell, and this was a little frustrating, but whatever. The maze spell just says you banish a creature that you can see within range into a labyrinthine demiplane. The target remains there for the duration until it escapes the maze. The target can use its action to attempt to escape. When it does so, it makes a DC 20 intelligence check. It succeeds. If it succeeds, it escapes and the spell ends. A Minotaur or a Grustro demon automatically succeeds. So, but it doesn't explain what it looks like, what it feels like, whatever. So I just kind of on the spot had to well, you're kind of in this rocky corridor, but there's no ceiling, and way up high you just see dark sky. And so I'm trying to come up with like give hints that they're not in the normal reality anymore. And through investigation and thinking and them asking questions and trying different things, and also some small hints from Grin, they eventually figured out kind of what was going on. And at one point, Grin and Elif the Warlock escaped and found themselves back in the outer sanctum with, the secret door still open in the void and all that. Where the other players, they didn't know where they went. And, Grin and Elif, spent a couple of minutes and then came back and all that and into the labyrinth. And now one thing that I did, I thought to good effect, and the way the players reacted, I think it was a good thing to do. When they hit the void, when somebody walks in the void, they're gone. Whoop. And you don't know if they've been disintegrated. You don't know what's going on. And as players would walk through, I'd say, you've disappeared. And they would say, well, was it like when the other player started, I was like, no, it wasn't like that, because the other player kind of started shrinking and then disappeared. This is like you hit the void, that inky black, totally dark, and then they're just gone. And I would not tell the players who walked into the void what happened. I just said, you're just, everybody else just sees you're gone. And eventually everybody walked into the void and disappeared. And I ended it as a cliffhanger. I said, well, we'll see you next week. And they said, well, are we going to be rolling up new characters? I said, maybe. I just kind of left it like that. So it was a fun cliffhanger to end things on. And then, next session, they found themselves in this labyrinth. So they eventually they figure out through, I think they were even using spells, those kind of divining spells where you can ask questions and get simple answers. And, there was a lot of different stuff going on. So between all of that and Grin and everything, they finally figured out. And I think it was like they finally figured out that there had to be a release of magical energy that would be sufficient to activate whatever's supposed to happen next, but they didn't know how much. So they were like, they cast like a 1st level spell, 2nd level spell, 3rd level, and they finally hit a 5th level spell and off they went. So, but honestly, without kind of hand holding them a little bit, I don't know how to get them through that, because they really don't have any clues from, anything leading up to that, you've got to cast a 5th level spell to keep going. The maze, they knew they were in a maze spell like effect, because they finally figured that out, but there's nothing in there that says if you cast a certain level spell, you'll move forward rather than just escaping. So I'm like, we still had fun with it, but I'm saying, you figure it's a good idea to think in advance. How are you going to maybe, set it up so they have a chance of figuring it out, rather than just go, okay, this part's too hard, here's what you got to do, or coming up with a different way, to get them through it. So let me see if I'm missing any other notes here. I know that there was, I had one of the things that we did role-playing wise that was kind of fun was one of the spellcaster players was specifically looking for a book. Once they found the secret door with the extra planar or whatever, and they specifically, can I have a book on, because detect magic I think will also tell you the kinds of magic involved in this and that. And so they were detecting magic. It was like this secret door with a portal behind it is obviously super magical. And so I think they were looking for books on, the types of magic involved and stuff like that. And so then that player was working with Grin to try to figure things out. How do we, what do we do with this portal and stuff like that? And eventually they were like, I think we're just supposed to walk through it. But that was because this player and Grin were buried deep in the book, was one of the reasons why Grin didn't see, the warlock over there, basically vandalizing the furniture in the Inner Sanctum of the Archmage of Menzoberranzan. So nice, fun little role-playing moment. Yeah. And then once they were in, I think this is one of the ways that I helped them without just handing them the answer. One of the spellcasters, who had, gotten that book and all that, they were in, the labyrinth trying to figure stuff out, and Grin and this player consulted together. And, after, they were really trying to figure stuff out, but to give some agency to the players in the party, then they kind of consulted together with Grin. And I said, well, because they were saying, is there any way I can figure out what's going on here? So I was giving them an intelligence arcana check, but by consulting with Grin and that book they had found and everything on the type of magic involved here, I gave them advantage, and to figure out the labyrinth puzzle. And I think I even I think I said in my head that if they did a DC 20 or better, they would just figure it out. They rolled a 16 with advantage. And this wasn't immediate. Like I said, they were really trying to figure this out and poking, prodding, kicking, asking, trying to divine stuff, whatever. And they realized, hey, we're in a maze spell like effect, but we're not straight up in a maze spell. They rolled a 16, so I said that's enough to realize that you need a spell discharge of sufficient power for something to happen. And then that's where they just started casting different spells until they hit a 5th level, which a 5th level spell for a group of 9 and 10th level players is, that's no small chump change for spell casting. So they weren't trying to hit their highest level spell right off the top. So they go into the Inner Sanctum. And in the Inner Sanctum, let's take a look at the Inner Sanctum. It says the circular chamber is lit by magic candles and floored in black stone, engraved and inlaid with magical diagrams in silver and gold. A female drow stands in the center of one magic circle, hands resting on her hips. Behind her, shelves and cabinets hold ceramic pots, glass vials, and other arcane paraphernalia, while a tome bound in black leather lies open on a lectern, its pages covered in spidery glyphs. The only exit appears to be an archway filled with a black void. There goes that black void again, which will take you back to the labyrinth. And then you have to escape it with a DC, 20? DC 20 intelligence check to get out. Now, what I did once they went back in the labyrinth, I said, eventually you all are going to get out. So we just kind of montaged and narrated that and got everybody out. But it was like, it takes you a while because doing a bunch of DC 20 intelligence checks, it takes a little while. So in here, it says any creature that touches the dark void is whisked away to the demi-plane that separates Gromph's inner and outer sanctum. We just went over that. The drow is a yokel demon in drow form. It's Loth's messenger to Gromph. She's imprisoned in the magic circle. It pretends to be a drow priestess named Yalara for as long as the disguise is useful, claiming to have been trapped in the circle by the archmage after failing to convince Gromph not to cast his spell. This is a lie. The demon tries to get the characters to free it by breaking the circle, whereupon it attacks and tries to kill them. As long as the circle is intact, the demon can't leave it and doesn't have line of effect to anything outside of the circle. The yokel does whatever it can to prevent the adventurers from leaving with Gromph's grimoire. The characters can bargain with the trapped or defeated demon. It is reluctant to tell them what it knows, but angrily answers questions in exchange for its freedom. The demon tries to convince the characters to release it before it tells them what it knows, and any promises it makes are forgotten once it is freed. So the yokel was sent by Loth to quote-unquote assist Gromph with his ritual, knowing that it wouldn't work as intended. When Gromph lost control of the ritual, he fled the city, but not before trapping the yokel. The yokel knows that Gromph's inability to harness the Fair's Rest is the reason why the ritual failed, but it doesn't know Gromph's present whereabouts. If the characters ask Yalara, which is the drow, form of this yokel demon, what Loth stands to gain from Gromph casting the ritual, the demon replies, chaos. If the yokel is killed, a character who investigates the grimoire can confirm beyond doubt that Gromph was responsible for bringing the demon lord to the Underdark. So, also, if the party acquires Gromph's grimoire, award each character 1500 XP. So, Gromph's grimoire rests on top of the lectern near the circle and bears the title Zon ol Leal, the Book of 8 in Elvish. There's 8 demon lords. And describes rituals for summoning and binding powerful demons. It's open to a chapter that talks about summoning of Demogorgon. The various arcane components and ritual items in the workroom are worth 1,000 gold pieces total. A 6,000 gold piece diamond also sits on a small stand atop a workbench. It contains any creature trapped by the imprisonment spell that guards the secret door in Gromph's Inner Sanctum. So whether they bargain with the yokel or fight it or whatever, after this encounter, finally there is the grimoire, which is the final ingredient needed which, as the characters are soon to find out, the talisman's already been created. The Dark Heart Talisman from all the other ingredients they've been collecting, but the grimoire is required in order to do the ritual that activates the talisman that brings the demon lords in for the final fight. So this was the yokel demon, had dominated one of the player characters, and that's when the Rod of Rulership came into it and all that we talked about earlier. So the imprisonment diamond didn't have details on how to disable it other than the standard 9th level dispel magic. And nobody here, so you got this diamond with a player character inside of it, which that'll probably likely happen in your campaign, unless all the characters are over 12th level. And I'm like, well, I can leave them stuck in this thing till they could basically get back to Vizeron and let Vizeron get them out of it. Or I can figure out a way to get them out of it and so they can be a part of this final encounter. So this is where I just straight up, one of the spellcasters, somehow, I can't remember how, like they did a perception. Somebody realized, whoa, there's what's going on in this diamond. And this is like while the fight's going on. And, I think the player that was trapped in the diamond started, trying to attract attention and things like that. And through like a perception check or something, they saw them. This is where I just stepped in as GM or DM, and Grin was like, we need as much help as we can get here because they were fighting this big demon and everything. And he, even though Grin by his stat blocks, he's a drow mage, shouldn't have a 9th level dispel magic, whatever. I mean, I can use Grin like I want. The players don't know who or what Grin is supposed to be stat wise. And so Grin dispelled and the diamond shattered and the player was freed. So I allowed Grin to free the player that was trapped in there. Now, one of the things that I want to point out that I did in this fight was the one of the players who's a rogue doesn't have a magic weapon. So in recent sessions and a lot of the fights, they've just been, because they may step in and try to distract or something like that. But for the most part, they've been hanging out and hanging back because there's nothing they can do. And to the point where one of the players in character was starting to get really suspicious of the rogue. Now remember, the rogue is already is already in disguise. It was the same character, but got himself in trouble with the guild for a fake deed or a deed to a faked deed to a house that no longer exists or something like that as collateral to provisionally join the guild and all that, and had faked that he ran off, and suddenly this bounty hunter looking for him showed up, but they're the same character. And so for that reason, and also that, not doing a lot of fighting, one of the players became very suspicious in character and was emailing me back and forth and, had given me some of their suspicions and asked, and I said, okay. And I was doing some rolling for them, and it eventually came out on the next long rest following this stuff that they're like, that's the same guy. They saw through the disguise and all of that. So, but ironically, one of the things that they were suspicious of this rogue about was just thinking he just didn't want to pull his weight. Was not much you could do. Right. So, so the rogue player at one point asked, are there any magic weapons here? And there's this concept that, I've heard discussed a few times of the past few years called saying yes to your players. And sometimes I think it's appropriate and sometimes I think it's not. But here I had a situation where, for whatever reason, I had a higher level player that did not have a magical weapon that was, worth much. I think maybe they had access to, if they borrowed it, like a mace of flame that was just considered magic, but it didn't have any pluses to hit or anything like that, but it was technically considered a magic weapon. And it was like, can I get a magic, is there a magic weapon or a magic dagger around here? And I'm thinking, okay, they really need a magic dagger. And two, this is a very appropriate place to ask for that, right? I mean, you're in a mage's laboratory, right? With all kinds of instruments and things. So it laying around and, you know, experiments and this and that. So I'm like, if there is ever an appropriate time to ask, is there a magical weapon around? This is a good time for that. So what I did was, I gave a 30% chance. I didn't just say you can have it, because then the other players were like, what? All you got to do is ask for a magical weapon and you get one. Remember, this is very circumstantial. I gave him a 30% chance, and I rolled under a 30%. And I said, yes, you see on this table what looks like, kind of an ornate dagger. And then from there, I gave it a 50% chance for it to be a +1 or a +2. I think it was like 50 and under +1, over 50%, on a percentile dice, a +2. I rolled a +1. The point is they got a +1 magical dagger by asking at an appropriate time. And even then, I didn't just Christmas tree and hand it out. There was practically a 2/3 chance that there wasn't, but I gave it a chance and they got it. And then they got a +1 instead of a +2. But that made them pretty happy. And it was story appropriate. They're in a laboratory, the Inner Sanctum of like the Archmage of Menzoberranzan. If you're going to find a magic dagger or magic wand or something laying around, that's the place, right? So anyway, they eventually defeated the yokel after, disguise, like, cause it was, the party was, some of them wanted to trust her. Some of them didn't. It never occurred to them to think, well, how long has she been in here? And what has she been eating? Because it's been a long time. She's been trapped in here for a long time. And that didn't seem to come up. Maybe afterwards it did. But that should have been the first clue that something, how long you been in here? What have you been eating? Right? But anyway, half the party was like, I don't trust her. The other half was like, yes. And then she was like, please free me. And one of the players just went up, one of the more reckless players started freeing her. A big battle erupted. One of my players was ecstatic because they had a yokel miniature they'd never gotten to use. So they were like, boom. And because I was like, it transforms like, blah. It's like this yellow, nasty looking thing. And so it was a big fight. And they finally defeated the yokel. And there is the grimoire. And that is where these most recent sessions ended. So, make sure to stay tuned. Next video will be the big final epic conclusion finale of all of this action. It's pretty cool stuff. So make sure to stick around. We'll talk more about wrapping up the Outer Sanctum, the grimoire, getting out of Menzoberranzan. What do they do? Where, they know now that the Dark Heart doesn't have to be placed in Menzoberranzan, like Vizeron said it is. So what are they going to do about that? What are they going to do? How does it all work out? Where does the final battle happen? Does the final battle happen? Does everyone survive? What will be the fate of everyone involved, and the Underdark and the Surface, the Forgotten Realms, and the Prime Material Plane itself, with all of these crazy demon lords running around. Tune in next time for the epic finale of Out of the Abyss, as my players played it. Thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you next time on Shane Plays.